Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Wednesday, May 26th, 2021. On today's episode of the show, we're going to be talking about the latest film and TV news. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm the senior writer at slashfilm.com, and I'm joined on today's episode by Slash Film writer Waichern Bui.
Hey everyone.
HT, it's just you and I today. We were going to do a water cooler episode, but the schedules got thrown out of whack. So I think the plan as it stands right now is to do that tomorrow. So people can hopefully look forward to that. But let's talk about the big news in Hollywood today. Really, the stories that we're going to be talking about on today's podcast are all related to one central story, which is Amazon has officially bought MGM, or the plan is in place for them to. I don't know if the ink is literally dry on the contracts yet, but tell me about it, HC.
Yeah, Amazon is shaking and stirring up the movie industry today.
Yes,
Yep,
love
I
it.
did it. So, Amazon has announced a deal with MGM to acquire MGM for $8.45 billion. Amazon and MGM announced that they have entered a definitive merger agreement. And this is kind of off the heels of the recent Discovery acquisition of Warner Media, and also of reports that Amazon and MGM had been in talks to have this acquisition about last week. And back then, it was reported that the deal was for about $9 billion, so not far off from that. Under this deal, Amazon will quote unquote preserve MGM's heritage and catalog of films, and provide customers with greater access to these existing works, according to the companies. MGM is one of the oldest studio names in Hollywood. It has nearly a century of filmmaking history in its library, and those works include 4,000 films, 17,000 hours of TV, and titles like James Bond, The Hobbit, Rocky, RoboCop, The Pink Panther, Stargate, Silence of the Lambs, and TV shows like Vikings and The Handmaid's Tale and Fargo. So yeah, this is something that has been in the works for a little bit. MGM had actually reportedly been exploring a sale late last year, and they had been quietly shopping to various companies. And now Amazon, with its bottomless wells of cash, has stepped in and forked over the $8.45 billion.
So let me ask you, HT. You mentioned that these companies said that they were going to quote preserve MGM's heritage and catalog of films, and that's something that I think we talked a lot when this news was happening about the Disney Fox deal, and I think it's safe to say in the wake of that deal, we still have a lot of questions about Disney's treatment of those Fox movies and exactly where this stuff is going to pop up. And there's been a lot of reporting about repertory screenings, especially right around the time of that acquisition actually going through, where earlier Fox movies that were able to be programmed pretty frequently in theaters around the country were suddenly pulled because of this new Disney deal. So I think a lot of people understandably are a little hesitant when there are these big corporate entities that are sort of doing this, playing chess on a level that like normal people don't necessarily get to deal with all the time. So I wonder what you think about the idea of Amazon saying up front that they're going to preserve this heritage and catalog of films. Is this something that you think is just corporate speak, or do you think that they've seen these complaints that cinephiles have had in the wake of the Disney Fox thing, and they're actually going to care about this? What do you, I mean, I doubt you have any like, super insider information, but just what's your sense of that?
Yeah, cynically, it sounds to me like corporate speak that this is about preserving that heritage in a way to assuage cinephiles' fears that, like, with things like you said, would fall to the wayside. Like these legacy titles, that these classics would not be given the due that they deserve. But inevitably, in any of these kind of big corporate mergers, things will fall by the wayside. Like, not only are those repertory screenings, like we talked about earlier, an issue, but films like that were in development at Fox, for example, that clashed with Disney's current plans for its own films,
Hmm.
like The Mouse Guard, for example. Like, the Disney wanted to have ownership over the family-friendly films, and having a Mouse Guard film under Fox would clash with that. So that kind of fell dead because of that thing. And I don't know if Amazon will exert that kind of control over MGM, if they'll take a step back, because they are a big, like, multi-conglomerate company that owns, the Washington Post and Whole Foods and everything too. So they obviously have many, many divisions, in addition to the Amazon studios that have been putting out some, good art house works in addition to transitioning more over to more commercial works that we've been seeing lately, like Tom Clancy's Without Remorse, for example.
Mm.
So yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know. Amazon as of now, like Amazon Studios doesn't have its own sort of identity yet as Disney did. So I feel like that kind of worry about whether it's in the Amazon identity isn't as much of an issue as it was with like Fox and the Disney image, for example.
Yeah, that's
Um,
kind of what I was thinking too. And like the idea of Amazon buying MGM almost specifically because of of this library content, right? It seems like
mhm.
they would almost go out of their way to uh, it seems like that is the asset that they're after, not necessarily like the studio and the history and like the I think maybe a case could be made that like part of the reason that Disney bought Fox, I think I heard somebody talk about this on a podcast. I don't remember the name of the podcast, so I apologize if I'm like completely stealing this idea. But just like the idea that the land of that the Fox Studios sits on in Century City is like such a valuable asset. Then Disney now owns that, or I think that there's language in their contract where they're going to own it sometime very soon.
Mhm.
Um, so without that sort of component to it, it does seem like maybe this merger is going to go better from a purely cinephile perspective. I don't know about the business end of things, but just from that heritage and protection of these films legacy, it seems like really the reason Amazon's buying this is so they can showcase all of these things, not necessarily to siphon them off and like put some in a vault, so to speak.
Yeah, no, optimistically, it's about showcasing these classic titles. Cynically, it's about IP.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. That's absolutely part of it too.
Mhm.
But like you said, I really think that that's a good point about Amazon not necessarily having like a clear identity right now because uh, yeah, you've got. I mean, in the article that you just wrote and you mentioned like titles like Without Remorse and Coming to America is another one that you listed, but they acquired that from Paramount. Like Borat, subsequent movie film. That first one was not an Amazon movie, so they acquired that from a different source as well. So sort of seems like they are looking for IP, but what is an Amazon movie? What does an Amazon movie look like now? Yeah, I'm curious to see how much of it is going to be like original films versus TV shows, and then like we were talking about on a recent episode of the podcast, like how much the general audience even cares about this stuff. It's all just tiles, on on a digital service. So
Yeah, that's
um,
true. I mean, we all should worry a little bit too because we're in a new monopoly age and we're the antitrust busters, but that's something that's a whole other conversation, I think. And yeah, something that I don't think the average movie or TV watcher or streamer will really worry about.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that I guess just so we don't completely repeat the same exact talking points that we went over during the Disney Fox deal, but maybe we don't need to get fully into that. But I think that's a good point too. Like that stuff should not be completely breezed over. Like this is an era where studios are owned by conglomerates. There's now like one fewer place, one less place. How do you say that? One
One
less
less
place
place.
for for potential storytellers to go to sell their stuff. More things are going to be made for streaming here, so there are like dozens of major ripples that this is going to have across the industry. But I guess it's too early exactly to say what the biggest one of those ripples is going to be. But yeah, I think it's important to mention that stuff, and this is not just this is not just like something that happens every day. This is a pretty big deal in the industry here. So, um, one of the reasons it's a big deal is because it involves the James Bond franchise, which is one of the most successful ongoing movie franchises in history. And we talked, I think, when last week when this news was originally coming out about this MGM Amazon deal potentially being in the works, and I think I was asking Chris about the future of the James Bond franchise and like what exactly it means if Amazon were to pull the trigger on this. And now that they have, we actually got a statement from Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, who are the sort of keepers of the James Bond flame, as it were. They run Eon Productions, which is the production company that has been associated with the James Bond franchise since the very beginning, and they basically are splitting the rights of the James Bond franchise with MGM. So now with Amazon. So Amazon is not going to be able to, now that this purchase is in the works, just suddenly drop a brand new Bond movie on Amazon Prime Video, for example. The Broccoli's and the Michael G. Wilson, they have a lot of say in what happens here. So the quote from Variety, the statement that they released today says, James Bond producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson have committed to keeping the iconic British spy in theaters. They said, "We are committed to continuing to make James Bond films for the worldwide theatrical audience." So, yeah, the rights are a little complicated with the Bond stuff, but I think that's the big question that a lot of people had is like, if this purchase goes through, which it looks like it's going to, what happens there? And it does seem like Bond is going to be one property that is definitely going to be sticking with the big screen and not necessarily, I guess, barring another pandemic or some other crazy thing that we can't foresee, it's going to be a big time movie in a big screen environment for people. So that's sort of an important thing. Where are you right now on No Time to Die HC, the new Bond movie? What's your sort of interest level, excitement level? That's a movie that was supposed to come out, I think, was it early in the pandemic, or was it just one of those
It
that?
was one of the movies that was supposed to be released, I think, in March,
Okay.
and they had a whole run up in the marketing. I remember Daniel Craig hosted SNL.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So they were ready to release it, and then it got pushed back to November of that year, and they thought that was a huge delay, and then they got pushed back to November of this year. So it's going to be in theaters regardless of pandemics.
Yeah. So, what do you think about that movie now? I know we've had a long time to sort of sit and wait with anticipation, and sort of with the taste of Spectre still lurking in the background. What are you thinking about No Time to Die these days?
I mean, I'm a casual James Bond watcher at best. I've seen only a handful of movies, and usually the ones that I grew up with, like from Pierce Brosnan on.
Hmm.
And I actually missed out on Spectre. I've seen every other Daniel Craig movie, but I completely just did not see Spectre. I don't know why.
You really didn't miss anything.
That's what I hear too. But I've liked the Daniel Craig movies, so like for the most part, I like Daniel Craig in the role. I'm probably gonna watch No Time to Die because it is his swan song. It's his last film, so I would say ambivalence is my best um thought process towards the James Bond movies. I enjoy them. I think Skyfall is a fantastic, grade A action movie, regardless of being James Bond.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't have like a huge opinion on them. I find them for the most part, especially during the Brosnan years, very forgettable and entertaining, but forgettable.
Yeah, yeah, man. I was just revisiting. There's a scene in, I think it's Die Another Day, where Pierce Brosnan goes off the edge of this giant ice cliff, and
Yes, I remember that
this
exactly
he's
though.
like he's surfing on waves with a parachute, and it just looks so awful. The CG is just man, like next level terrible. So
Very silly.
it's unfortunate that Brosnan was sort of operating in that era where like CG sort of became the big draw for movie making, because I feel like if he was a Bond in a different era that wasn't as CG heavy, that he was a pretty good Bond that just didn't really have a lot of great Bond movies to work with. But I guess that's a whole other conversation too. So sorry for sidelining things here. Okay, so one other sort of story that is related to this big Amazon MGM purchase is the fate of movies like The Wizard of Oz and Singing in the Rain and Gone with the Wind. These films are obviously like some of the biggest and best films ever made. They're widely considered full blown classics for a reason, and they're MGM movies. They were made at and by MGM, and these movies are not involved in this deal, and that is because uh, every single movie that MGM made before the year 1986 was purchased by Ted Turner, the media mogul who was behind networks like TBS and TNT. He bought or orchestrated a series of deals in 1986 to be able to buy MGM's entire library up until that point. And basically, the point was for him to have a bunch of titles that he could populate his new networks with, including Turner Classic Movies. So it's basically he was doing the same thing that Amazon is doing now. He was buying up this library to be able to sort of like mine it for content really, and just go through and be able to bolster his own library. So anyway, Wizard of Oz, Singing in the Rain, Gone with the Wind. These movies were made obviously before the year 1986, and they belong to Ted Turner, which has he's since sold them off, and now they belong to Warner Media. So those movies are available on HBO Max right now if you're interested in checking those out. But I think that's Wizard of Oz especially is like one of the biggest MGM movies of all time. You sort of like associate that movie, and I guess all three of these really, Wizard of Oz, Singing in the Rain, and Gone with the Wind, you always sort of associate with that big MGM logo, the roaring lion, the whole deal. And just for a lot of people, there's some confusion about why those movies are not involved in this deal. So that answers that question. It's more of like a trivia thing than anything else, I guess. But like I said, all three of those movies are available to watch on HBO Max if you want to check that out right now. HT, any sort of final thoughts about like the state of the industry right now? Do you anticipate any other like big studios or anything selling off or sort of combining forces? I know there's been talk of like Sony has sort of been just like sitting quietly for a long time. Sort of same thing with Paramount too, where like they haven't had any super huge hits in the past few years. And those studios, I feel like there are always whispers about like, oh, maybe somebody will swoop in and buy them, maybe an Apple or a whoever. Any predictions, I guess, HT, for what might happen soon?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get the feeling that over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be seeing not only predictions but actual deals being made of this ilk. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's Sony, Paramount. What else? Universal is
Yeah,
under
Universal, I feel like
Universal.
is doing pretty well. Like they've got they're I guess technically they're NBC Universal, so they have
Hmm.
like a whole theme park infrastructure in place, for them too. So I feel like them and maybe, well, I guess Warner, now that Warner Brothers is linked to Discovery and Disney, are like the three that I would say seem to be safe now. But yeah, you've got Sony, and like maybe Lionsgate is
Oh
you
yeah,
could maybe
Lionsgate.
see them being acquired or something. What do you any
I mean, I
specific?
I'm not like a watcher of the industry goings on, so I can't
You don't have
exactly
one of those
say.
like ticker tape things that like
Yeah.
gives you stock information or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing at some point, it feels like there's just been like a domino effect with Warner Media and now MGM happening. It's sad, isn't it? Like Warner
Yeah,
Media and like Warner Brothers and MGM are two of the oldest studios, and they're the ones that we associate so much with classic Hollywood, and now they're being felled by these newfound these multimedia conglomerate companies like
yeah.
Amazon and Discovery.
Yeah, what a weird one. I still can't get over that.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. I don't know. I guess I'm just like a little depressed
Yeah,
that this is
it is kind
happening,
of
but
depressing.
it feels like it's inevitable. This is what's going to happen, especially as streaming becomes so huge as it is. So, yeah, I get the feeling Apple's going to swoop in and grab itself one of these major studios.
Yeah, I guess if just to make things interesting, let's just say whether we think Apple or Netflix is going to buy a studio first, and we don't have to get into any specifics beyond that. But if you were to put money on one of those two, which would you say is going to pull the trigger on something first, AC?
For some reason, I'm betting on Apple first because I feel like Netflix is doing so much work and spending so much money on trying to create its own almost studio in a sense. It's
Okay.
become more of like that content creator versus just being a company. So that's my thought. I don't even know if they would have enough money to do $1 billion deal, even though they seem to have bottomless wells for their own original titles. I just think that Apple would be more likely to try to actually acquire another studio.
Yeah. I think you're probably right, but I'm going to say Netflix just so we have our bases covered here. And one day we can look back on this podcast episode and be like, ah, yeah, I guess one of us was right.
Yeah,
And it'll probably
$5,
be,
please.
yeah, it'll probably be sooner rather than later that we're making that sort of retroactive assessment. So, all right, I think that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode of Slash Film Daily. Like I said, hopefully we'll be able to do a water cooler episode tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. You can find more about the stories that we mentioned on today's show at slashfilm.com and linked inside the show notes of this episode. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all of the popular podcast apps, and send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at peter@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.